It was a moment that would go down in courtroom history, one that no one could have predicted. The air was thick with anticipation as the case progressed, the usual flow of legal banter echoing throughout the room. But then, something changed. Something shifted that day. No one expected what would happen next, especially not the seasoned lawyer who had pushed his luck one too many times. Judge Boyd, known for his calm and collected demeanor, was about to lose it, and it would happen in the most unexpected way. The courtroom had been quiet, almost too quiet, as the lawyer stood before the judge, his voice smooth and controlled, but the words that escaped his lips were anything but respectful. It was clear from the beginning that he was testing the limits of what he could say, walking a very fine line. At first, it was subtle. A comment here, a question there, all designed to provoke a reaction. But as the lawyer pressed on, his words became sharper, more cutting, more dismissive of the very process he had sworn to uphold. It was as if he had forgotten where he was. He wasn't speaking to a jury, nor was he speaking to an opposing counsel. He was speaking to Judge Boyd, a man who had spent his entire career maintaining the dignity of the court, and now he was being pushed to his breaking point. The judge's expression remained neutral for a while, his hands folded neatly on the bench, his eyes focused on the lawyer with a measured calm. But there was something in the air, a tension that was building, and everyone in the courtroom could feel it. The lawyer didn't euro, T seemed to notice, his arrogance fueling his words, driving him deeper into dangerous territory. And then it happened. The lawyer made a statement that crossed the line. It was an offhand remark, but it was enough to trigger something in Judge Boyd. His eyes flashed for a brief moment, a glimmer of anger that quickly disappeared, replaced by a chilling calm, but the damage had been done. The lawyer, oblivious to the judge's reaction, continued with his questioning, pushing the boundaries further. For a split second, there was silence. The kind of silence that seems to stretch on forever, where every sound is magnified. The sound of the clock ticking, the rustling of papers, the shuffling of feet. All of it seemed to echo in the room, but the judge said nothing. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog. And then Judge Boyd spoke. His voice, low and steady, cut through the silence like a knife. "Enough," he said, his tone firm but measured. The lawyer stopped mid-sentence, caught off guard by the authority in the judge's voice. His smirk faltered, and for the first time he seemed unsure of himself. The judge leaned forward, his eyes locking with the lawyer. "You ve crossed the line, counselor. You may be used to speaking freely in this courtroom, but let me remind you, this is not a place for arrogance. This is not a place for disrespect." The room seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls were listening. The lawyer, now visibly shaken, opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Boyd silenced him with a single gesture. "No," the judge said, his voice cold. "You will not speak until men finished." The lawyer's confidence began to slip away, his shoulders sagging slightly. He knew, deep down, that he had made a mistake. He had underestimated the judge's patience, and now there was no turning back. Judge Boyd had seen it all before the flashy lawyers, the loudmouths, the ones who thought they could manipulate the system. But today, Judge Boyd was not having it. "You then made a mockery of this court, counselor," the judge continued, his voice steady. "You ve forgotten the most important rule of all, respect. Respect for the law, respect for the process, and above all, respect for this court. You have none of that left." The lawyer opened his mouth again, but no words came out. It was as if the judge's words had stolen the very ability to speak from him. His mind raced, but nothing seemed to make sense. The room had become a pressure cooker, every person in it waiting for the next move, the next words from Judge Boyd. "I will not allow this courtroom to descend into chaos," Judge Boyd said, his voice rising just slightly. "I will not allow you to continue with this disrespect. You may have the knowledge, but without honor, you are nothing more than a mere speaker, not a lawyer." The room was stunned. For a brief moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The lawyers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what would come next. The jury, too, was watching, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had never seen Judge Boyd lose control like this before. Ilya, now realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to compose himself. He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain himself, but Judge Boyd was already moving forward. "I don't want your apology," the judge said, his tone final. "I want you to understand the seriousness of what you have done." The lawyer swallowed hard, his throat dry, his hands shaking slightly. He had gone too far, and now there was no going back. The judge's words had hit him harder than any objection or reprimand could. He had expected a stern warning, perhaps a reprimand, but not this. Not the full force of Judge Boyd's authority. "From now on," Judge Boyd said, "you will conduct yourself with the respect this court deserves, or you will find yourself outside of it." The lawyer nodded, his face flushed with embarrassment. He had been humbled, something that rarely happened to someone of his stature. With a final glance at the lawyer, Judge Boyd turned his attention to the rest of the room. "We will continue," he said, his voice now calm and composed once more. "But let this be a lesson to everyone here. No one is above the law. No one is above the court." The lawyer took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He knew that the game had changed. The courtroom was no longer his domain. It belonged to Judge Boyd, and he had made that abundantly clear. As the proceedings continued, the room was quieter than before. The lawyer had lost some of his confidence, his earlier bravado now replaced with a sense of caution. He would have to be careful from here on out. The judge had made it clear, push too far, and there would be consequences. And in that moment, everyone in that courtroom knew that Judge Boyd's authority was not to be taken lightly. As the trial moved forward, the shift in the courtroom dynamics was palpable. The lawyer, once confident and smug, now stood with his shoulders slumped, his previous arrogance replaced by a forced composure. It was clear that he had underestimated Judge Boyd, and now every word he spoke was measured, cautious. He was no longer speaking with the authority he once held, but with the hesitance of someone who had been deeply humbled. The room, which had once been filled with the noise of legal banter, was now eerily quiet. The jury, no longer swayed by the lawyer's confidence, looked on with renewed focus, aware of the gravity of what had just transpired. Even the spectators seemed to hold their breath, knowing that the judge's words had changed the course of the trial. Judge Boyd, for his part, had regained his composure, but his presence was now even more commanding. His earlier outburst had not been an emotional reaction, but a calculated demonstration of authority. He had made it clear the courtroom would not be a place for disrespect, and he would not allow anyone, no matter their standing, to undermine the integrity of the law. The lawyer attempted to recover, but the damage was done. His words, once sharp and cutting, now seemed hollow. He had lost the respect of everyone in the room, and he knew it. The judge's rebuke had been swift and powerful, and it left no room for debate. What had started as a verbal sparring match had quickly turned into a lesson in humility. For the rest of the trial, the lawyer treaded carefully, his arguments more restrained, his demeanor less brash. His earlier attempts to provoke the judge were replaced with more calculated strategies, each one designed to avoid further confrontation. But no matter how carefully he spoke, the air in the courtroom had changed. The respect that he had once commanded was now replaced by a quiet sense of skepticism. His every word was now scrutinized, weighed down by the memory of his earlier disrespect. As the trial neared its end, it became evident that the judge's words had left an indelible mark on the proceedings. The lawyer's case, once full of promise, now seemed to falter at every turn. The jury, though still impartial, could not ignore the effect the judge's authority had on the trial's outcome. It wasn't just the facts of the case that mattered now. It was the behavior, the integrity, and the respect for the law that had taken center stage. In the final moments of the trial, the lawyer made one last-ditch effort to salvage his argument. His voice was quieter now, his confidence replaced by a sense of urgency. He appealed to the juror's sense of fairness, presenting his closing statement with all the passion he could muster. But it was clear that the spark was gone. The jury, though still listening intently, could sense the shift in the room, and they were not as easily swayed as before. Judge Boyd, who had been silent for most of the closing arguments, finally spoke. "Why Euro, counselor, why Euro?" he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "I have heard your argument. And while I respect your right to present your case, I will not allow this trial to be influenced by the antics that we Euro witnessed today. Why Euro?" The lawyer Sace turned pale, his last hope slipping away. He had come so close to winning, to securing the victory he had been working toward, but the Euro's words were final. There would be no last-minute triumphs, no dramatic turn of events. The trial had been lost not because of the facts, but because of the behavior that had preceded it. Judge Boyd turned to the jury, his gaze firm. "Why you have seen the facts, you have heard the arguments. But now, I ask you to consider the integrity of the court and the conduct that has taken place within it. Your decision should reflect not only the evidence presented, but the respect for the process that has been disrupted. Why Euro?" The jury nodded, their faces solemn. It was clear that the Euro's words had resonated with them. They were not just judging the case, they were judging the actions that had unfolded in the courtroom. The Euro's earlier antics had left a stain on the proceedings, and that stain was something the jury could not ignore. As the trial came to a close, the Euro's fate was sealed. The Euro's decision was not just about the verdict in the Euro, it was about restoring order and respect to a courtroom that had been thrown into chaos. Judge Boyd had made it clear there were no shortcuts, no exceptions. The law was bigger than any one person, and anyone who disrespected it would face the consequences. The lawyer, defeated and humbled, left the courtroom that day knowing that his career had been irrevocably altered. His loss in this case was not just a professional setback it was a personal failure. He had lost the respect of his peers, the trust of the jury, and, most importantly, the authority of the court. But Judge Boyd, despite the intensity of his actions, had emerged as the true victor. His ability to maintain control in the face of provocation had not only restored order in his courtroom, but had reinforced the principles of justice that he had sworn to uphold. The message was clear. In Judge Boyd's court, there was no room for arrogance, no place for disrespect. The law would always prevail. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more courtroom drama and inspiring stories. Your support helps us bring these powerful moments to life, so stay tuned for more amazing content.